Okay, complex numbers. Right, z1 times z2. Right, that's 2 minus I multiplied by 3 plus 2I. May as well do that right now. Okay, so 2 times 3 is 6. The outer is positive 4I. The inner is negative 3I. And the last is negative 2I squared, which is positive 2. So my numerator is going to be 8 plus I, because remember that is actually a positive 2, and that goes with the 6 to make 8. Okay, that's my numerator. The denominator, if I add these two, right, 2 plus 3 is 5. And negative 1I plus 2I is plus I. So that's what I have for z1 plus z2. I just added the two together. Now, I now have to simplify this, divide it, you multiply by the conjugate. There you go, 5 minus I. Right, so the denominator, 5 times 5 is 25. The outer is negative 5I, the inner is positive 5I, they cancel. The last is negative 1I squared, which is positive 1. The denominator is 26. Now, the numerator, I just have to bundle my way through it. Okay, 8 times 5 is 40. The outer is negative 8I. The inner is positive 5I. The last is negative I squared, which remember is positive 1. Okay, that'll go with the 40 to make 41. Negative 8I plus 5I is negative 3I. And again, all over 26. Hope that's okay, no mistakes there. Right, let's take a look at some of these next ones. Okay, so sine of what is a half? Sine of 30 degrees. All right, sine of 30 degrees is a half. In other words, this must be 30 degrees, or pi over 6 in radians. So this x plus pi over 4 must be pi over 6. Okay, that's what it must be. But also, let's have a think. What else is also right? So in other words, remember, it's positive. So we've got to think about this. Go back to this, okay? If we're thinking of 30 degrees or pi over 6, all right? That's what it is. So what also is positive a half when you sine it? Remember, this quadrant over here is positive, okay? So this is, if you want to think of that as 30 degrees, this is 150 degrees, all right? Or 5 pi over 6, okay? So if we take a look at that then, we've also got that x plus pi over 4 is also equal to 5 pi over 6. Remember what these are? These are where sine of this angle is a half. Again, sine of this is a half. That's why this here equals these here, okay? So again, 30 degrees and 150 degrees, if you want to think of it like that. So I'm just going to take away pi over 4 for both of these. Now then, the problem with this is, if I take away pi over 4 from this one, I'm actually going to get a negative answer. Let's take a look. X equals, right, if I do a common denominator of 12, that is 2 pi over 6. 12, common denominator 12, minus 3 pi over 12, which is negative pi over 12. Okay? Now, of course, I don't want negatives. The complementary angle, all right, so if I go over here and think to myself, right, if I've gone down to negative pi over 12, then what is it in the positive, the complementary? That's actually 23 pi over 12, okay? So actually 23 pi over 12 is one of the answers. Again, remember complementary angles. I've done 2 pi around. You remember 360 degrees? Complementary angles. So I can't use negative pi over 12. So it's 23 pi over 12. In other words, 2 pi, or 24 pi over 12. That's 2 pi, remember? Okay, so that's what I've added to the negative 1 pi over 12 to get 23 pi over 12. Okay, so that's one answer. The other ones are going to be okay. If I just do this one here, if I take away pi over 4, so that's 10 pi over 12 minus 3 pi over 12, common denominator, that's 7 pi over 12. So 7 pi over 12 is also an answer. Okay, so remember this. Okay, remember this. Remember there's 2. There's 2 where sine is a half. Okay, let's erase all this then. Okay, next one. And then the next one is actually it's looking like a quadratic equation to me. In other words, if I do this, 2x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. In other words, if I let sine theta equal x. This is, if you remember, is u substitution. I've called it x substitution, no big deal. All right, so if I do factor that, I'm going to get this 1 and 1. So that's going to be negative, that's going to be positive. In other words, x equals 1, or rather sine theta equals 1, and x equals negative a half, or rather sine theta equals negative a half. Well, with sine theta equals 1, that's 90 degrees, okay? So 90 degrees. Are we going to call it 90, or are we going to call it pi over 2? Doesn't really matter. Again, remember, sine theta, which 1 is 90 degrees. Where is it negative a half? Right, negative a half. Okay, so where sine is negative, okay, think of 30 degrees as the reference angle. Here, right? So it looks to me like 210. Okay. Also, 330. And I'll let you convert that to radians yourself. I'm okay with this, of course, so that's what it would be. Okay. Right, let's keep on going. Finally, for these, we have, right, let's divide both sides by 2 first. So sine 3x equals root 2 over 2. Root 2 over 2. Now that is 45 degrees, or pi over 4. In other words, 3x equals pi over 4, or 45 degrees, okay? So this must be 45 degrees, or pi over 4. Okay, so are we doing sines? Right, it's where it's positive again. You can think 45 degrees, you can think 135 degrees. You can also think pi over 4, or 3 pi over 4, okay? Right, let's take a look at this. So we have 3x equals pi over 4, but also 3x equals 3 pi over 4. Okay, remember over here as well? I guess we just divide both sides by 3. So pi over, what's that? 12 and 3 pi over 12, or 1 pi over 4. Okay?